Good morning, everyone. This is Keith. It's Thursday morning, the 26th of August. I saw in the news last night that last night was the last sunset after 8 p.m. until next spring. So the days are getting shorter and the fall is in the air a little bit. To get some summer squeezed into everything, I'm sure everybody is. But it's good to see you. We had a wonderful time at Finley Lake this week. We continue in our sermon series to go through my giants of the faith. And if you recall, we started off with with Noah and with who did I pick? Someone. Noah and somebody. And then we went into Abraham. Then we went into Moses. The past 2 weeks we did David. And this week we do Elijah. Elijah is important to me for several reasons I'll share with the church on Sunday. But throughout the Old Testament, there's prophecy that says that the Messiah will come with the prophecies of Elijah. In other words, Elijah will precede the coming of Jesus. Now, to the Jews, they don't believe that the Messiah has come yet, so they're looking for Elijah to come, and then the first coming, Messiah, Jesus that comes. You go to Israel and you see them even putting their cemeteries facing the eastern gate so that they'll be ready for their Savior to come. And they've got that expectancy. But what I want to make the point of today is that even in their Seder meals, even in their Passover meals, they leave an empty seat with the expectation that Elijah will come and then the Messiah will come. Now, in Christian faith, we believe that John the Baptist was like Elijah. John the Baptist was the voice in the wilderness that prepared us for the coming of Jesus. And then we expect also in Revelations and throughout the New Testament prophecy, again, Elijah will come. This time, very possibly, Moses and Elijah out of heaven will come to tell us that the Lord is coming again. And what's our job as the Lord is coming again? It's our job to help prepare the world for the receiving of Jesus again. So we've got a job to do. It's the work of God's people. It's the work of the church. It's our work. Not so different than the work back in the days of Israel. The days of Elijah were about 100 years after the days of David. So this is about 100 years ago. So think back around the turn of the 18th, the 19th, or the 19th to the 20th century, around 1900 versus today. That's about how much time there is between King Ahab, Elijah, Jezebel, and all the things that we're going to be studying in the next 2 or 3 days. We'll be preaching on Sunday. The text is primarily found in 1 Kings, the end of 16, but really 17 through 19, and then 2 Kings 1 and 2, where Elijah goes to heaven in a chariot of fire. I'll be preaching Sunday more of an overview of Elijah. And then the following week, we'll be preaching Paul on Labor Day weekend. And then I'll do a recap of the giants of the faith and the lessons that we can learn from these particular people that are devoted to Christ. Not perfect, very human, but devoted to Christ and his mission as we are and as we should be. Today's story out of the life of Elijah is about Elijah being fed by the ravens. Let me read to you what's going on, and I'll give you the text and the context and explain that to you. 1 Kings chapter 17. Now Elijah the Tishbite. Tishbe is in Gilead. It's not far from Samaria. Matter of fact, I remember buying the balm of Gilead when I was there, and that was more closer to Qumran and the where the Essenes hung out at in Qumran and the Dead Sea Scrolls in that area of the Judean desert. As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except by my word. This is the words of Elijah speaking to King Ahab. King Ahab was king of the northern kingdom. After Solomon, the country of Israel separated in north and south. Two tribes went to the south, and that maintained the line of David, and that was mostly known to us as Judah. The 10 tribes north of there were the 10 tribes, or known as Israel. Ahab was an evil king. Ahab was a bad king. Uh, the Bible will tell us that he was amongst the worst of the kings, the most decadent, the most corrupt, the most depraved of the kings. He married Jezebel. Jezebel was from Phoenicia, which we would know as the Mediterranean coast of Syria. And these were the water people that came from Greece. But um, it's important because it shows up in the story just a little bit later. But Elijah went to Ahab and just said, Ahab, you're missing it. Baal worship was brought to this world by you. And of course, we're Israelites and we're supposed to only worship the one true living God. Ahab, you're taking us down a bad path. Interestingly, Baal in mythology and understanding of the time was the god of weather, the god of thunder, the god of storms, the god of fertility. So Baal had a place, but it was in the sign of weather. That's why this is important. Listen to these words again. As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years. You see, this is not a battle against flesh and blood. This is a battle against the god Baal with a small g. He's an idol. He doesn't live. He doesn't exist. He's in someone's mind, but he doesn't exist. He's just represented as an idol. We represent the living God, the sovereign God, the creator God, the God of all times, past, present, and future. But the people of Israel have gone down the road following Ahab and Jezebel so wickedly and so determinedly that they had really lost every connection. They had practically sinned away every last ounce of goodness they had. In order to get their attention, God says, Elijah, go talk to Ahab. Tell him that their weather god has got no power at all over me. Matter of fact, to prove it, I'm going to send a drought. I'm going to send a famine so that they can see that their God is useless and without power. And that's what began to happen. That's what happened in 1 Kings 17:1. Now, at this point, Jezebel got really angry. Ahab did too, but Jezebel, the bad queen, really got angry and wanted to kill Elijah for being the messenger of this word from God. So this is what happened, and I'm going to read just the first 6 verses maybe, and we'll see if I read beyond that maybe just a little bit. 1 Kings 17, verse 2. Then the word of the Lord came, leave here, turn eastward, and hide in the Kerith ravine. Kerith ravine. Some people spell it with a C. The NIV spells it with a K. The Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan River. So this would be the land that we now know today as Jordan. It's the east side of the Jordan River. You will drink from the brook, and I have directed the ravens to supply you with food there. So here's a prominent, highfalutin, well-known prophet, Elijah. And God is sending him to the wilderness, so to speak, to a brook. But I've directed that you don't need to control your destiny. I will control that. I will feed you. I will take care of you. Where I give you direction, I'll give you provisions. So go there to the creek, and you will have plenty of food. And the ravens brought food, and the brook provided water. So Elijah did what the Lord had told him. He went to the Kerith ravine east of the Jordan and stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. Verse 7. Sometime later the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food. A couple quick thoughts there. Zarephath is along the Mediterranean coast in West Syria. Now, where did I tell you Jezebel came from? This is Jezebel's homeland, the land of Sidon, the land of Phoenicia, the land of West Syria, as we would know it today, along the Mediterranean. Jezebel and Ahab are looking for Elijah. And where does God send Elijah? Right into the belly of the fire, the demon, And who would ever think to look for Elijah up there? Wonderful hiding spot. He went there once the river dried up and the ravens could no longer provide their needs. He was called to go to a widow, not that he would help the widow, but rather that the widow would help him. Well, talk about a humbling experience. Here's a prominent evangelist, prominent preacher. Think in our day of a TV preacher, being told to go to a little town in the middle of the enemy's territory, and a widow would take care of you. He's not going there to help the widow, although he does. He's going there that the widow would take care of him. And I think what I'm pointing out is in a prophet's journey, in a journey of faith, and a journey of growth, as we have seen with Abraham and Moses and David, there are quiet times, desperate times, solitude times, and at times that seem most desperate and left alone. Imagine what Elijah might have been feeling as he was told to not only go into enemy territory, where his life would even be more at risk, but that he was going into enemy territory to be taken care of, by a widow. A couple thoughts and a couple points about this passage. I want you to know that there's value in being at the alone times. Elijah went to Kerith with a sense of being chased, a sense of hiding. But God was using it as a time of formation. Remember Moses? He went to the desert to hide from Pharaoh, and for him it was a time of growing. David, as shepherd boy, was in the fields, a time of hiding or a separation from the world. Abraham, he left the cities to go to a place called Canaan that would one day be his home. But again, he was into a place of desolation and separation. What's the first lesson today? First lesson, number one. We must be willing to be set aside as we are to be used. There's value in a hidden life. Being fed in the morning, fed at night, and otherwise time that your soul and your spirit might be strengthened by God Himself. We must be willing to be set aside. We must be willing to be taken out of the mainstream of life for a season. We see this in many, 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 many of the lives that God uses throughout the Bible, where they are prepared and taken out of the mainstream of life. Number one, we must be willing to set aside, or to be set aside, as we are to be used. F.B. Myers talks about the value of the hidden life, and he quotes a hymn. Let me read you the first verse of that hymn. Speak, Lord, in the stillness, while I wait on Thee. Hush my heart to listen in expectancy. We are taken out of the mainstream of life that we might be nurtured and discipled by God Himself, that His Spirit would nurture ours, and that our heart would listen to the Spirit of God. Now, what's the second point? The second point is God's direction always gives us God's provision. I sometimes say God gives us all that we need to do all that He asks. Same point. When God directs us somewhere, He gives us what we need to take care of it. Go to the Kerith Ravine. But God, there's no food there. There's no restaurants. There's no fast food. There's no Peachtree. What are we going to do, God? God says, it's okay. I'm asking you to do something, and I'll make sure you've got everything you need to do everything you need. Go to the brook. It will provide for you. The ravens will provide for you in an unorthodox way. But isn't that the way God is? God is often unorthodox. Matter of fact, when I think about the beginning of 1 Kings 17, God did not send a general to talk to King Ahab. A general would have flexed his muscles and raised his spears and said, Ahab, you're going down, man. What did God do? He sent a prophet, a mouthpiece of God, to speak the words of God. For this wasn't a matter of physical warfare. This was a matter of the heart. This was a matter of the soul. And Ahab's soul was so corrupted that it was nearly gone. He had nearly sinned away every last ounce of goodness that he had. And Ahab went to him as a prophet, or not Ahab, Elijah went to him as a prophet. First point, We are often set aside in the wilderness for times of spiritual teaching and preparation so that we can listen, so that we can hear God, that we can turn down the volume of the noise of our life and be able to tune in to God. Second, God's direction and God's provision. If God directs you to do something, He certainly provided for you to do that. And with that, you should not doubt, but you should just go ahead and not think too much. Number three, we have to learn to trust God one day at a time. Elijah didn't say, God, the brook's going to dry up. What am I going to do next month when that's gone? God, winter's going to come. God, this is going to happen. God, this is going to happen. What's going to happen? God says, don't worry about it. Today's troubles are enough for today. And I know we need to plan and prepare for the future, but right now, savor the moment that God has you in, that you might be a voice or you might listen to what God has to say. We must master the art of living one day at a time. I'm not very good at that, but I'm getting better at it, but to live one day at a time. Physically, we can only live one day at a time. I can't live tomorrow today physically. But you know what? Unfortunately, my intellect and my emotions, I can project forward and backwards. I can live in the past and not let go of the past. I can look forward to the future and be determined by the future, but not look forward to that or be formed by it. That's not what God wants. Be present in the day. Cut off your thoughts when you can get consumed with tomorrow. Cut off your thoughts when you think about all the hurts and all the pains and all the resentments in your past. I encourage you today to savor today for the day. I've got kind of a special and unexpected day coming up today, and I am praying to God that I am not bothered or burdened by yesterday's problems or tomorrow's expectations, but that I could savor the day with the company of the people that I am called to be with today. We must master the act of living one day at a time. Fourth, the brook dries up, and then what happens? The brook dries up, and then what happens? God says a dried up brook is often a sign of God's blessing and God's pleasure, not his disappointment. I think when the brook dried up for Elijah, God was saying, Elijah, you've learned what you needed to learn. You've heard me speak what I needed to speak, and you've embraced what I've said, and you're ready for the next step. The brook's dried up because it's time for you to move on. So there are times that we are in refuge or haven or retreat, and God's ministering to us. We're being made strong, and that's the way of God is he heals us and he prepares us to go to the next step. When the brooks of your life dry up, have you ever felt like that? Maybe God is calling you to not go backwards, but to go forwards into a new world, a new adventure, and a new time. A dried up brook is often a sign of God's pleasure, not his disappointment. Abraham, off to Israel. Paul, his first ministry trip in Lysteria, he was nearly stoned to death. Joseph, remember Joseph, the son of Jacob? He went to Egypt and he was thrown in prison. Jesus, he too passed through Gethsemane. There are times of trial and challenge when the brooks of our life dry up. But often it's that God is then preparing us for the next step of our journey of faith. Number one, we are often set aside and moved apart from the mainstream of life that we might hear God's voice. God provides for us. God provides for us. And wherever he gives us direction, he gives us provisions. Number three, we have to learn to trust God one day at a time, for today's problems are more than enough for today. And number four, a divided brook is often a sign, a dried up brook is often a sign of God's pleasure. Now, what is it that God's trying to do in these journeys? I'm running out of time, but let me quickly spit them out there and then we'll follow up, I'm sure, at some other point. God is trying to develop and transform the inner life of our soul. The fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. Linda Morey talked about that yesterday in her devotions. Our pride, and we all have it, our pride must be submitted to the lordship of Jesus. Our fear must be given way to faith. We can't let fear control our lives. We must be able to step forward and step out in God given faith. So God uses the loss of our position, our prestige, our popularity, our privilege. And when these things are gone, we begin to walk by faith, one step at a time, small steps at first, then big steps. Our pride, our fear, God knows that our resentments often cripple us. We often live in the past and hang on to the past and get angry and resentful, prompted by anger. I have my rights. These are my rights. I should have, I could have, I deserve. So when we're in the preparation stages for ministry, when we're in the faith journey and growing in our faith and trust in God, God looks at our pride. He deals with our fear. He handles our resentments. And fourth, he works on our habits, long-standing, deep-situated attitudes and behaviors. Oftentimes they too must be renovated, and we must learn humility to be formed and changed, and allow ourselves to change our ways. I want you to know that God and his love for us crushes our pride, removes our fear, breaks into our resentments, and changes the long-standing habits of our life until we are totally renovated and transformed on the inside, until we rest in our God and are ready for his will and his assignment for the things to come. We can see in this passage, and I'm telling you a little bit what we'll talk about on Sunday, he's being prepared for a showdown and a face down and a takedown against Baal, the false god, the idol god who, according to people, can control the weather. But God will show us that he is supreme. Yahweh, the God, the living God, the creator God is our God. Dear God, please help this congregation, this group. May you encourage their spirits. And if they're going through a alone time and a dark time, may they be prepared. May they listen. May they set aside the past and realize you've provided for them and all that they need you've taken care of. So God, please help them, please bless them, and please take care of them. Friends, I look forward to seeing you on Sunday, and we're going to be sitting out the Thursday blast. We'll have some directions for masking and some of the things that we're thinking about along that line. But anyway, today is the day the Lord has made. God bless you, and God take care of you. Bye-bye.